housekeeping before we get started, and then we'll run through the tax reporting agenda for today. Firstly, housekeeping, if there's any questions, if you can write them down in the questions panel for me, and I will attend to those at the various sections to stop and check if there's any questions that people have as we're going through the webinar today. Please ask the questions as we're going. I will stop at times to review those, so I won't wait till the very end, so we'll deal with the questions as they come up and as they arise. Our agenda today, we're going to have a look at tax reporting and what it is that we need to do to get prepared. There's certain areas in the database that we need to make sure we have access to, which is the Tax Data Investigator, the Tax Data Extractor, and the Tax List Customizer. So I'll explain what those fields are and why we need to get into those areas. We'll also have a look at the Tax Agents area, which is where we report and request reports from the ATO via the ELS system. Once we've requested those reports, we'll have a look through standard reporting. We have two selectors in standard reporting, ATO reports and tax other reports. The other area of reporting is Practice IQ reporting. So we'll have a look at the tax dashboard and the tax summary area. Then finally, we'll take a look at importing ELS reports if they've gone off into a third-party system, how you can get the ELS report from the third-party system and then re-import them. Typically what can happen is a client list could be requested, and a secondary tax system might be used to lodge other things like super funds or other type of tax returns that are using the same agent number. So that could be received in your second software system, and we can extract and import that data from the other software. So that's new in the latest 2015.05 release. We'll have a look at the bulk import of activity statements. We did cover off this process quite a lot in the electronic activity statement webinars, which are available on the recorded webinars area. I'll show you where you can find those for future reference. We'll also take a final look at the completion codes. For those of you using Reckon APS tax forms, we'll have a look at how the completion tax codes works and what options you can do, which is also another new feature in 2015.02. So let's get started and have a look at getting ready and having a look at our tax data extractor reports and making sure that our database is ready to go for the tax reporting that you want for your tax agents. So within our database, you will need to have access to, if you're the tax administrator, you need to make sure that you've got access to the following information on your administrator screen. You've got tax agents, tax data extractor, tax data investigator, and the tax list customizer. The first thing that we'll have a look at is the tax agents area. The tax agents area, for each tax agent, there is agent forms. Under the agents form area, there is year groupings. If I go back to 2014, you can see the type of reports that I've requested for this tax agent called practice name. The type of reports that we would recommend that you request regularly is the full client list, which tells us what the ATO has for the clients registered under the tax agent that you're requesting this for. So I'm going to show you how to request that client list under the action menu, and we're going to create an RR form. The RR is an agent request form. There are two types of requests that you can do within the agent forms area. The first one is I would select request the following report, and I would see client list. You also see the other types of reports that I can select here is the client lodgements statistics, which tells me the percentage by return type I think that have been requested, and the activity statement client list. So the client list is your main form type, and your activity statement client list is, or your activity statements that you're the agent for. For our client list report, there is 3 options of the type of report that you can request under ELS. The report that we use to extract information from for the ATO due date, every client on your client list has an ATO due date, or possibly most clients, the ATO may not supply the due date for every client. This is the report that we would request that you ask for, certainly at least monthly, coming up to an ATO due deadline. Then you might ask for it for another week before that due deadline to see what's on the report. It's this all clients list that we use to extract the due dates. Okay. You can only request one of these reports per agent before I could ask for another report. So I have to request this report, lodge it, send it to the ATO, wait for the ATO to send it back to me before I can request another report. Once I've got that report back, I could then request the next report, which might be the activity statement client list. Okay. You'll probably get a validation error, or if you've asked for a report while there's still one in progress from the ATO. These reports here are solicited reports, so it means I need to do this as an action to go and get the report. The other type of reports that you can request as an agent is what we call unsolicited reports. These are all in detail in the ATO agent guide on the website, so I can refer that link to you in the presentation at the end. This area here is that we have got a due lodgement report, an EFT reconciliation report if you're transmitting that, the activity statement lodgement report, and the summary report. With these type of unsolicited reports, when you request these, there is a flag to either receive or not receive the reports. Now, unfortunately, we can't tell, even though we've said to receive this report for the due lodgement report, the flag at the ATO end will either be on or off. So when you lodge this report, if you're asking to receive it and you are already receiving it, the ATO turns the flag switch to off. So all of a sudden they'll stop receiving it. Fortunately, that is the way that the ATO ELS system works. So before you go and change your unsolicited report status, I'll show you where you can check if you are already receiving these before you change the status. Okay. If you're all of a sudden you've turned your status off, you do need to contact the ATO to reset the flag. Fortunately, we are limited by the ATO on that one. So in this case, I'm just going to ask for the full client list, all clients, and I would add that return. I've got a test system, so I'm just going to call it a test tax agent because I've got a demonstration database. Obviously, you would need to do that on your system. Okay, I'm just going to stop and pause for a moment while I check if there is any questions. Thank you. Someone said that they can hear me okay. That's great. I'll just let you type any questions that you do have in there. I will continue on, but I will check those in again in another few minutes. So at this stage, all I've got here is a list of the report that I've requested, and you can see I've requested that quite regularly in the last 12 months. The date lodged, that will populate once you actually go through and lodge those requests. So how do we do that? The person responsible for lodgements would complete that task using batch processing. I'll just let that open. So in our lodgement screen here for batch processing, I'm going to go under the lodgement status. And you'll see here that I have plenty of requests that I've requested I've not lodged. So normally you would only have one RR request at a time, because I've been naughty and just kept asking for them. I haven't actually lodged it. So you'll see the return type will say RR request. And then it's the same process that you complete to lodge your normal tax returns to go and lodge the RR request. So I won't continue that. As I said, we need to lodge that. Once the ATO has processed that, you'll notice that the next time that you connect into the ATO, you might notice who's the person that is the lodger. They'll see some stuff coming backwards and forwards on the transmission report, and they might see something that says, you know, report received. In batch processing, sorry, I shouldn't have closed that. I'll let that reopen. In batch processing, you'll be able to see the ELS files, and you'll be able to see in here if there is any reports when they have been received. So the client list report, I can see there's some in the system. You can't view the report or anything in here. If I say show ATO report, it'll give you gobbledygook. It's the ATO report specification format with asterisks and arrows and all sorts of things. All this is really showing me in ELS files is that the report has come back. So the way that I go and access and look at that report, now that I know that it's arrived, will be in standard reporting. So in our standard reporting area, we can change our selector. And again, we need to make sure that we had given the rights, Joe security rights, to make sure that you can see this selector for ATO tax. If I look under then the reports, you'll see that there are the various reports that are available from the ATO that get received will be listed in this menu listing here. The report, the client list full that I requested, it will now show me the details of what's in that client list full. I can either group it by agent, I can group it by partner, and I can also group it by manager. How we can do the groupings by partner and manager is if I open the report, I'll just do this one, it's only got a couple of clients in here, so it's going to be easy to explain. I can see in my report here, this is what's come from the tax office. That's my fault, gobbledygook, me trying to replicate the report from the tax office, so the agent would normally have your agent name there. It says that there's 3 records in the tax office. The first record, the sort name for that record, it says no database reference. It means that we cannot find the trustee for ABC Family Trust in the APS database. Okay. The reason why we won't be able to find that record is there's potentially duplicate tax file numbers stored in the database, which means we don't know which one is unique for that client. If it was an activity statement list, it could also mean there was a duplicate ABN number. It might be an invalid TFN or ABN. It could simply mean that you've not done a CU form yet to put this particular new client you've got. Oh, sorry, you've done the CU form, it's on your tax agent list, but you haven't yet added your client into your APS database, so they just don't exist at all in the database. Or we don't have a current year tax matter attached for that client. So there's some of the main reasons why we're going to see this no database reference found. The way that we match the taxpayer name from the tax office to the sort name of the client that lives in the APS database is through the tax file number in the Oz file number field. So if I go back into Central Console, if you look at any record in Central Console, I'm on Practice Management version 10 here, under the Oz file numbers, you need to store your tax file number in this section here. The other thing that I said it looks for is it looks for a current year tax matter. Now, it will probably work if it has a prior year tax matter as well, but it needs to have one of those tax launch link matters attached to the client. That tax file number if you've entered it in yourself, you will only be able to enter valid tax file numbers. So if I try and enter something that is weird, the system will come up and warn you that it's not valid. However, if you've had other firms merge into your firm and you've had some work done on your database, it may not have gone through those validation references, and therefore they might come up as invalid. We need to run checks on your database to make sure that they're okay. So before I come back to the reporting, I will come and show you how it is that we go and check for invalid, duplicate and inappropriate tax file numbers. Because it's important at the end of the day that you are reconciling your list from the ATO and what's in your database and know all your differences as to why there is no database reference found. I'll minimise that. I'll close out of batch reporting. So what do we need to do to make sure that our data is accurate? The other item that you have in your application list is called the Tax Data Investigator. I might just check and see before I open that if there are any other questions before I keep moving on. We're all good. Tax Data Extractor. Okay, when I open the Tax Data Extractor, you can see here that I have a few different options that I can look at in my database. In practice management is where the Oz file numbers live, and this is where we would check if we have things like duplicate TFNs or duplicate ABNs. I also check whether I've got invalid TFNs or ABNs. So let's look at those two first. If I click the next button, it will then show me for each item that I've selected how many records had a variation. So in my case, I just have a duplicate ABN. So if I want to find the details of that particular client that's a duplicate, I can double click on that, and then it gives me the list of who that is the duplicate. It also tells me what tax agents attached, the client partner and the client manager. Now you potentially could have a large number of records in there. So you can put that then into Excel and then deal with that. Common issues are there is that maybe the trustee company and the trust have shared the same ABN or TFN number, duplicated the record and didn't update the details. Okay. So they're the two common culprits there. The other ones you've got in here is that you may have added your tax matter or your tax returns and put tax file numbers in your actual forms, but you haven't put them into the database. So we need to check for those type of things as well. I don't think I've got any of those. The other items that you've got in your PM area, if for some ever reason you haven't got mandatory, partner manager and tax agent selected, then when you're doing your filtering in your client list to group by partner and manager, it probably won't know where to group it by. Okay, so you can look for any missing data there. The next one we have is that we have a tax return added for the current year in 2015 that's sitting in Tax Manager, but it's not in the ATO client list. I have 8 of those, okay? So obviously I needed to do a CU form for all of these clients to make sure that they go into the client list. Okay. To help you obviously manage all your lodgement deadlines and percentages that you need to keep track on, then you want to make sure that you've got your client list and your ATO APS database in alignment. Okay, the other items that we've got, we can see what ATO reports have been received. It tells me I had 31 of them. I can see what reports have been received when. Down on my exceptions, I've got in the ATO client list, but not in advance, which was the one client that we saw in that one list before for the trustee of the family trust. So I can report on that here in my exceptions. And I also have the ability to report of the activity statements that are in Tax Manager. However, you may not want all of those clients in Tax Manager. For example, you might have some clients that get the activity statements sent to them directly, and they're a small client and they're not the actual main entity, you're just acting as an agent for them on behalf and distributing it. So you could have potentially a number of clients in that category. Okay, there is also Tax Manager Summary Reports. You can click on that, which tells you, it summarises things in Tax Manager that you want to look for. If you've got future returns rolled over, current year duplicates and missing, that's what it's looking at in Tax Manager. So you need to look at it at both levels, both the practice management and Tax Manager areas. And then you need to deal with those duplications. That will then sort out all these sort names that will come up as blank. Okay. If I try and redo my report, this time my client list group by partner. Partner, no database match found. One, because it doesn't know the client, so I can't find a partner. And then the next page, I have my next partner. So it will always group it by agent, then by partner. So if you're a practice that has a number of agents, then you may also want to review your filters that are available on the report itself. So the report is the output of the report that you selected up here. And on your selection filter, I can also select client attributes, tax agent. If I had a number of tax agents and I'm only looking for a report for one of those tax agents, I can filter for that agent and rerun the report that I last did. Okay, so that's our client list, full client list. There's no reason why you can't request the lodged and not lodged report. The only reason why we're suggesting that you need to do the full client list is so that if there was a due date on the full client list, last day of lodgement, that 15th of June 2015, if that return did exist in the database, and I'll go back into my Tax Manager database, you'll see that we have a due date on each of the returns. So how do we get the due date in there? It comes from the ELS tax agent list that you request and download. So when you go and open a return, if it has a current client added to the database, remember my Dawson De Silva didn't exist in my client list, that's why this one's blank. Okay. So it doesn't know where to find the due date for that particular return. Assuming that your client list and your ATO database are in sync and you've got all your clients on there, as soon as you create that return, it will then put the due date in based on what it's found from the ATO client due date field. Okay. So if I've populated and rolled everything over and I have my client list, how would I then update the due date for clients that may have already existed? I don't know, did the tax office change the due date? They could do, the tax level has changed. If you've lodged a return, and therefore it may change the due date. So we only store in the database the current client list. So that's why we would then request another client list next month. Once I've requested that new client list and I've received it, the other thing I might want to do is extract the due dates out of that client list and update all the returns with the new due date if it was different. This is probably the step that we've left off. A lot of people have forgotten about. It's been a little bit ignored, is actually updating your due date fields. The tax data extractor is the area that we go into to do that extraction. Tax data extractor has two purposes. one is under the report view for our client list, is to extract those new due dates. So if I go to the report view and select client type, client list, and apply, it will go and extract the report data, including any new due dates, and update the due date field for the returns that exist in Tax Manager. That's the only report that you need to do any manual processing on. So that's the area that perhaps people may have left off and wondering why the due date doesn't appear in the Tax Manager, even though it's sitting on a current client list. The other thing that you can do in the Tax Data Extractor tool is expose other fields from different returns to be able to report on them, either in your return detail summary area or in tax lists. Some people use that extraction of detail in here for marking purposes. So for all the individuals in 2015, I want to make sure that if they had a business, I want the new ANZIC code to appear. So that's already extracted. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. But the fields here on the left-hand side of the screen, if I wanted to put in another field, I can go to company perhaps. There's a few more unextracted fields in the company. I'm looking for any capital gains and I want to report on that, then I can add this list, add the capital gains to my list on the right-hand side. You see that that's in bold because I've now wanted to extract an item from all the 2015 returns. I would need to apply that so that the system knows to go and find that field for any 2015 returns. If I wanted to apply that to prior years, I would have to go and re-extract information for each form type for the prior years and apply that information. So if you've got thousands of tax returns and decide you want a new field added, I would suggest that you do this process after hours, okay? Because it's going to open up every return for that particular year for that form type and write some queries and hit your database with a big query hit to go and find the information for you. So it could potentially slow down your network if you're doing a big extract across the system. So that we do expose a number of fields that can then be seen when you look at your return details. I'll pick one that maybe has some client data. Sorry, I don't have returns with data. I'll go back to... Oh, there we go, we've got some data. So what we're seeing in the return detail screen is what we've asked to extract for that particular form type out of the Tax Data Extractor. That view at the moment is just showing the current year. As a user, you have user settings, and each user can show how many years prior data that they would like to see in that view. Now, if it's a main form type, it will show me 4 years data because I've asked for 4 years data. Don't have anything in the return, but it builds up as you put the data into your return. Okay, so that's your return details. For those people that want to be able to market that information that you've extracted, we would use Tax List Customizer, which is our other tool, to add that to our report so that we can output all that information. Before I go into that, I will just check again if there are any questions before we move into that area. Good. Right. So, for example, that ANZIC industry code field, for example, is something that I might be interested in reporting on for all my individuals. They are in that field. I would need to go and extract that information out of the other administration tool called Tax List Customizer. So that allows me to pick statuses or anything that I've extracted from the extractor and add this onto my client list. So a couple of common things that we do add to the Tax List Customizer. If we right-click and add an item, the two types you have here is a status date. So if I want to have in my list, for example, give me all the tax returns that were sent for signing on this date or greater, then I need to be able to add the status date into my tax list field. So if I go sent for signing, double click on that and go next, it will now add a sent for signing, and I can put that as a description to say I need the date for that. And it will add that to the list, and I keep going through and add that to any other status that I would like to know, or do any reports that uses the date, as opposed to just knowing the status. The other item I could do, I was interested in that industry code field. If I go to return details this time, I can see for each different return type that I've got all the areas that I had used as tag sets to be able to export those into my client list. So I would go down and find the item. There's lots of items and individuals. It was business income, I think. Business. That's what I could be scrolling there all day. I'll just use that one as an example. Okay. I hit finish. So what I've done here is I've added 3 custom fields that I can now see and expose in my reporting tool. So our standard reports was available for all the ATO ELS reports, and under tax you also have tax lists. Anything that I've added to the tax list customizer is available now as a field to use in your tax list area, so I can now expose the EFT account name in that example. So I can add these either to my criteria or my output fields. So many of you might already have tax lists set up, which exposes the information from the database by using a filter criteria in your list. For example, I might be looking for all tax returns in the tax year for 2015. I don't have a lot of data, so I'll just leave that as my filter. 2015, and then for this particular report, I want to know some return details. What's the TFN, what the return type is, what the current return status is, and when the due date might be for that return. I want to know who the partner and manager is that's looking after the returns, and I need to know the client name. So what I'm building up here is a list of different items that I can put into my report. I might save that list and save it as. Save it as 2015 tax returns so that myself or anybody else in the business can have a look at that. I will put that to a data sheet, and then it gives me the 4 bases that I have in the system at the moment for the 2015. I don't have any due dates, and they're all at a status of rolled over. Okay. So depending on what you're asking for, you could get hundreds of thousands of rows, so it's important that you look at the filters. And we'll do some further webinars on how to use what we call here the selectors to get the most out of that. The tax list selections are available for you to do custom reporting. As I said, you can also output things for marketing so that you can expose information that's sitting in the tax return with other information that sits on your database and mark it away. So have we got any questions just on that process before we move on to the next? Just another tip while we're in the lists area, if you've gone through and created a nice report and happy with the data, then I would suggest and recommend that you save that report in your private list and then save as. You'll see that the save as list will say now it's in your private list. I typically would suggest that you number the private lists. So when I click on the drop-down filter, I can see anything that's in the public list, which is everything, as well as anything that's in my private list. The only distinction I have between public and private is the way that I name the actual list name. So if someone goes ahead and deletes that beautiful list that you've gone and created, and you think, where's it gone? You've got to back up in your own private list. And then you can go and republish that into the public as the original item now. Okay. So we've had a look at some of the standard reports, which was just the client list, and we looked at the things that would influence that client list in terms of getting our data ready and making sure that it's complete by using the Tax Data Investigator to look for holes in our database. The Tax Data Extractor is used once you've got your client list and you want to re-extract the due dates. And we can also report additional fields through our tax list customizer. Remembering that the reports that we're requesting are from the tax agent and they're filtered and grouped by year. You can only request one report per agent and receive it before you get the next report. So if I was wanting to ask for another type of report, and I wanted to do an activity statement list, and I also wanted to check what are these unsolicited reports. So the unsolicited reports are what come through from the ATO based on the tax agent requesting to receive them. So if you've requested to receive the due lodgement report, the ATO will send the report when you next connect to your ELS mailbox around 21 days before the due date to say that these are the ones we're expecting to be due. The OL, Activity Statement Lodgement Report, will give you a list of all the returns that you're the tax agent for the activity statements and BAS and tell you whether you've lodged, not lodged them, or it wasn't applicable. The OM report tells us what agent you are the agent for all the clients for the activity statements. And it will also tell you whether you are lodging them by ELS, which means that they will come into the APS Tax Manager system, or whether they are being lodged on the Internet business portal or ATO portal directly, as well as paper, the ones that are going straight to the clients on paper. So it's a good report. Sorry, that's on the activity statement client list. That tells you the type of method, how they receive it, and then the OM report just gives you a summary of all the DIN numbers for that period of where you're the agent, irrespective of how they are lodging. As I said, that unsolicited report has a status. It's just a fixed switch of on or off, and unfortunately we can't tell what that switch is going to do unless the tax office has done it. But if you're not sure whether you've received any of these reports, the best way to find out before you lodge any of those unsolicited reports will be go into standard reporting and have a look at any reports that you may have received. So you know exactly then whether you have received any in the past for that agent or not. So in standard reporting, we're going to go into the tax ATO. And I'm not going to filter at this stage. I'm just going to look at, do I have any due lodgement report? If I get no data satisfies the criteria, it's pretty safe to assume that I've never received one from the ATO for that agent. Now you may need to filter that by agent depending on which report you got. You can do that under your client. The other one that we could look for was the client statistics report. Have I ever received any of those? No, so it would be safe if I went and requested that to receive it, that I would now receive that report. And so I have a lodgement report here. That's what that one would look like. So that might be a starting point to check before you go and hit receive or not receive on those unsolicited reports, to make sure you're flicking the flag with the ATO the correct way. The other type of reports that you can get, which are important with the electronic activity statement, so if you've lodged an activity statement on your APS system, as soon as you lodge that, if you used to get it on paper, it will change the flag to receive that electronically. So any way that you'll receive that information is then through the AB and the AI report. So one for the activity statement and one for the instalment activity statement. The ATO sends those as unsolicited reports. You don't have to request to get those. Once you've got them coming through for your agent, they just send them at their generation date, which from memory is around about the 15th of every month. They say allow for up to 7 days from that time before they'll send those reports. If I want to look at what report I've last received, if you double click on the AB report date, you can see you have a filter then for the report for the last activity statement. So when you're looking at the reports for the activity statement, if I look at the summary, you want to make sure that you have a filter on. Sorry, I don't have any data in it. You want to make sure that you've got a filter on those reports. Otherwise, you'll be seeing every AB report for X amount of years that you've been the agent for. Same thing with the OM report. You definitely want to put a filter on your report as to when you're looking at the information. Okay. The other thing to look for, if you know that the generation date, I think they are published on the website of the ATO, within 7 days you haven't received your AB or AI report electronically, because you can see the dates here have stopped, you've likely had some interference with your ELS system to receive that. Either the report has gone onto a separate tax software system that you might be lodging in, i.e. your Superfund system, if you're lodging in multiple systems for the same tax agent. The ATO doesn't know what software is connecting when you go through to the ELS thing, and once it's got a report ready, it will send you that report back. So if you haven't received it within that 7 days, you definitely need to be contacting the ATO, because they won't regenerate it after that time, even if they can within the 7 days. So we are looking out for those things. Okay. The other type of reports that we do have in standard reporting, we have all the ELS reports. As I said, they are also available on the ATO Tax Agent ELS Guide to get the definitions around those reports. That activity statement client list is a good one to get to make sure that you've looked through your clients to see, one, whether they existed in the database, you don't have those duplicate TFNs or ABNs, that you have updated them into your client list form for the activity statements to act on behalf of the client. And you'll also see that this report will tell you the date it was last received and how it was being received at that point in time. So with all the changes last year with moving to electronic, if you've got particular clients that you need to change and send it back to paper and send it to them directly, you will need to lodge a CU form to do that. The tax office may also be wary about changing things back to paper, so you may also need to call the tax office because their preferred method these days does seem to be electronic. So they're what's under the ATO report. The other type of reports that we have in standard reporting is under other. And under the other reports, these aren't fixed formats that have come from the ATO. These are just what we've done in the Reckon APS Tax Manager product to give you some additional reporting about what's happening in your returns. So in there you do have some basic reports in terms of tax lodgement reports by tax level or form types, and you can filter that for the particular year. Due income activity statements, tax returns, the number of returns that you've got in the system. If you need to go in and get status histories on particular returns or clients, then you can do that through this tool. If you're charging time and billing from the same matter that you do your tax return from, you can see your turnaround and your WIP in the report attached to the tax return. So these ones you can just flick through and have a look. Tax other variance, TFN reporting, and we don't need to go through the 2012 issue. So they'll all be available on your system, and you can have a look through those that will have some data. You may want to filter those by the tax year so that you're not looking at everything in your tax database since day dot. Okay, so that's the standard reports. We've covered that area, and we've talked about how there could be some variances with the no database reference found. The activity statement client list and the client list, as I said, suggest at least monthly to get those. The other type of reports that are available, if you're using Practice IQ, there is a Practice IQ report pack that we can implement and install on your system if you don't already have it. So I'm going to just refresh this Practice IQ tax reports. They use a combination of the reporting services reports, which just give you, we've got some very old data in there, okay, 2009. We've got some information that tells you for the particular tax year, for the tax agent, and the return types, the number of returns that are in Tax Manager, the percentage that have been overdue, the number of returns and number lodged, and just some basic information on that and some trends between what you've lodged this year versus the last 2 years. You can see how you're tracking, and then you have those statistics broken down by partner and manager. So that's our dashboard report. Anything that I drill through from in this report, if I want to see those 24 returns, you can drill through, which goes into the next level of report, which was called the tax summary report. So it tells me if it was overdue. I'm not tracking too good here, they're all red. And the client of the year, what the due date was, and the date that it was lodged. If I further drill through to one of those, it then gives me more information about that particular client in that return. So we've got a couple of reports there. Let's come back. The slide deck would be available so you can see those reports. As I said, we've got the trends and the drill through, as well as the detailed reports. And the other type of report that you have got available is a tax pivot report. If you've used Practice IQ, then you know the power of the pivot. You can report by year, return type, statuses, what processes they're in, and what percentages, number or percentage or both. Okay. Have we got any other questions there on the reporting? Then please put them in the questions pane. Okay, one of the other areas that we've got is, I suggested before, if you're lodging in multiple tax systems, then potentially some of those ELS agent reports that you've requested may have been received in your other tax lodgement system. So in the other tax lodgement system, there'll be a report that'll be called RTBCL 600 something or other, and it tells you that in the system. It says it's a file name. You can actually find that file in your directory for that third-party system, and you can then import that file into APS. So if you're not familiar of your third-party software where you find the actual ELS reports and where they're located in the directory structure, you can log a call with the third party to find that information. So this item in Tax Manager under the Action menu will allow you to import and process that manually. The other item that came out in the 2014.4 release was the ability for you to import activity statements from the ATO. So if you're receiving your activity statements, the A, B and AI report from the tax office, and you've got the June quarter or the June annuals that come in and you've got hundreds of them, then you can import them straight in to Tax Manager and give them a status of rolled over. If they're imported into Tax Manager and have a status, then we can report on them in Practice IQ. Okay. If they don't exist, then the form itself, we don't have any reporting in IQ. So we need to have the forms in there. In that process, once you've clicked on that button, you'll find the next screen will pop up the import activity statements. It will then allow you to choose the year and the period, and then you'll see whatever the reports, you'll see those names I was talking about before that have come in. It's a area where you can drag and drop if you've got multiple agents and you're only looking for a particular agent. You highlight the agent and the report that you're looking for and go OK. It will then pop up the bulk import of the activity statement screen. So it tells you what's inside that electronic activity statement for the period. If your system doesn't have the same standard matter attached for every type of matter, then you will have this second selector on the right-hand side to say the standard matter should be BAS-IS 2014, but for some reason I have duplicates, so you'll see a list on the right-hand side that will have a number 2 at the end of it. 4. You would pick what client matter that would be attached to. It will go through and lists all the statements that can be created. In this case, it's got 29 ticked and someone's unchecked. This is South American tours. If I just tick the box, create the activity statements and go create, it will go through and create the forms in Tax Manager for that period, put in the DIN numbers, whatever details are on the activity statement that will be imported with the due dates, etc., will be sitting in Tax Manager as a status of rolled over. You can export that into Excel if you need to. It tells you which statements can be created. It will then have subgroupings under this to say, well, it didn't have an ABN or an ABN division number match, so it wasn't sure which one to put it through to. So it lists those separately. It tells you that a matching statement already exists for the matter, so it won't go and add the same form twice. It'll tell you that it doesn't have a matter for clients, so you need to make sure that you go and add your 2016 activity statement matter before you can create the form. The statement is not supported by the process engine. If you have some customization in the way that you do your activity statements and you use a different process, it will tell you if it can't do it for that reason. Unidentified statements. It has an ABN that we don't know in the database, so we haven't stored it. So we don't know who the client is to go and attach it. Can't uniquely identify the client. It might have an ABN, but it's not a unique one, so there's duplicates, or the DIN already exists. So if you've got those issues, you can process what is there to start with, then go through the form and deal with what the exceptions are, and then you can also come back in and recreate the same thing for the same period. Next time that you process that, you would have a lot less than 29 saying it's available to create. So you should be picking up what's not there. As I said, the advantage of doing that process then is that you can use Practice IQ also to report on those things in your reporting. Do we have any more questions at this point before we finish up with the Reckon APS Tax Forms completion codes? So I might allow people to ask questions there, because if you're not using the Reckon APS Tax Forms, this section probably wouldn't be applicable to you. Okay, before we go back to that, I'll just quickly show you the release notes for 2015.02 has in there the process of where you would turn on the completion codes and why you would do it. So I'm just going to go into Tax Manager. So I have a BAS here that started. And in my BAS, I have turned on the new function in the 2015.02 release to allow the user to use a completion code. Down the bottom right-hand side of your return, depending on your screen layout, you'll see that the return is not marked as complete. So at the moment, I'm in the started status state, which means that it is an editable state. And I'll just close that. That was clever. And I finished the return, and I wanted to go to review. So I'm going to mark the return complete. When I mark the return complete, it gives me a lodgement code for that return as 8175. If the return then was printed with that declaration, it would have a lodgement code of that same number at the bottom of the ELS lodgement sign-off form. Okay. It's also now changed this particular return to read-only status. So if somebody else was coming along, you'll see that there's a little tick now, which is new on the left-hand side of BAS, to say that that return is actually complete. If I go and reopen the return, you'll see in the top section of your return type that now it says read-only. So I can't actually do any changes or anything to that return because I've already marked it as complete. It's obviously gone out for signing. Someone else hasn't updated that status for signing. So the reason why the completion code came in is in case people haven't been updating the statuses for sent for signing, or as an additional security to say sometimes what can happen, even though if we've changed the status to sent for signing, which is then read-only, if the return came back and there was a slight adjustment to be made on the return gets updated. The client had signed an authority for a return that may not reflect what the changes have come through. So it's just giving you, I suppose, another audit trail of the process that the client has a copy of a return that has a lodgement code with the form that they have signed. Now, it's not mandatory that you activate that function. It's just an additional option available to you. If it was already complete and I want to change it, I hit the complete button again, and it tells me that changing the form will make it not complete. The lodgement code won't match. Are you sure you want to continue? You would say yes. You go and do your changes. When you've done that again, you would complete it. It gives you a new code. The effect of that change will mean when we're looking at batch processing, I didn't send it for signing. I signed. So if I make that ready now for lodgement, make that signed. I'll go and select that BAS for my processing. Go through the same process here, hasn't changed. Select my agent. Rather than automatically be selected, because I've turned on the lodgement codes, you'll see on this screen here that there is a lodgement code now of 2999. So the operator that's checking that before they lodge, check that on the ELS declaration form and then select it and apply it. If you've implemented that change to returns from a certain period, anything that was generated before that time, you don't need to have the lodgement code, it's just an additional option. We'll just check in again to see if there's any other questions. Probably a lot to take in If you're not familiar with those areas, we have recorded the webinar so that you can go back to it. And I'll show you where that is on our website. So the supporting area under our Reckon APS website, you can go into the recorded webinars. If you want a copy of the slide decks with this on there, they'll be available in your handout section on your webinar area, on your little slider on the right-hand side. You'll see here that we have got recorded webinars available for people to view, either on YouTube or download. They'll be the ones that we've had in the last few months, 6 months, around XPA tax integration, XPA tips, New Year staff budgets, PDF docs, and the XPA 10 process. We'll be uploading some more webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks, so we'll have the Q3 and Q4 webinars in there so that you can register for those. And if at any time you want to book a consultant, you can click on the Book Consultant. So there's our webinars, and the other area that you can look at in terms of understanding all the different acronyms for all the ATO client list reports and the ELS information, that's available on the ATO website via the ATO ELS Agent Guide for 2015, and that will explain all the different types of reports, different schedules, and on the website also you should be able to get the generation dates if you do a search for the generation dates of when it's going to populate the AB, which is the activity statements, and the AI. So I'm just going to now check in with some questions. If you don't have any questions and you do want to leave now, then thank you for attending. And I'll go through the questions. I'll read out the questions that I have got here. I've got a couple around completion codes. Can the completion code be removed from the ribbon? The completion code won't appear in the 2015.2 tax upgrade by default. It's turned off. It's a deliberate action to turn on the completion code through your system and user settings, which is in the release notes. So it's off by default. So you don't see the completion code. Okay, it's down the bottom of the AusTax section. And you can also have the options whether you want to activate it on the upgrade it's false, and whether you also want to force that on a batch processing that they've checked it. Okay. There must also be some R&D tax offset legislation still pending with the government, so we have a field in there. At the moment we've said that's false. Obviously if it comes through, it will change information in the tax returns, that will get updated in a tax release or managed through there. Okay, is there any other questions? Just to also reiterate where the tax release notes would be inside the tax returns, you've got references. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that 2015 release notes, they are available in the release notes sections on your tax returns. And you'll also find in there is links to the AusTax and XPA integration, as well as the lodgement codes guide. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If you do think of anything else, then you can email me at apstraining@reckon.com and we'll go from there. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, for your attention today, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.